What if I told you that one of the greatest songwriters in history, a Nobel Prize winner and the voice of a generation, hates some of his own albums? That's right. Bob Dylan, the man behind Like a Rolling Stone and Blowin' in the Wind, has publicly or privately regretted releasing more than a few of his own records. Some were rushed. Others were disasters in the studio. And a few he just flat out disowned. But here's the twist. It's not just the bad albums he regrets. Even a few fan favorites make the list. Stick around as we uncover all 7 albums Bob Dylan secretly, or not so secretly, regrets recording. Trust me, number 4 will shock you because it's one critics loved, but Dylan didn't. 1. Self-Portrait, 1970. Let's start with the most infamous one. Even Dylan fans who adore his weirder side will tell you, Self-Portrait is a mess. Dylan threw this double album out into the world, packed with covers, weird production, and a version of Blue Moon that sounds like it was recorded in his bathroom. But here's the thing, Dylan knew exactly what he was doing, and hated himself for it later. In a rare moment of honesty, Dylan told Rolling Stone, "I just threw everything I could think of at the wall. It was something to get people off my back." In other words, this wasn't a genuine creative impulse. It was a defensive move, a way to destroy his prophet image. Critics were brutal. The legendary Greil Marcus opened his review with, "What is this shint?" Dylan later admitted he regretted putting it out the way he did. Not because he didn't mean it, but because it sent a message he couldn't take back. Fans left confused. His mystique tarnished. 2. Down in the Groove, 1988. Fast forward to the late 80s, and Dylan was in another slump. Down in the Groove came out at a time when nobody quite knew where Dylan stood. The album felt like a Frankenstein project, cobbled together from outtakes, jam sessions, and forgotten B-sides. Even Dylan's longtime collaborators admitted this one felt like it had no direction. He didn't promote it. He didn't tour behind it. And he never talks about it. That silence says everything. Some albums fade into the background. This one? Dylan practically buried it alive. Critics didn't help. The Lay Times said Dylan sounded bored, confused, and off-key. Fans who stuck with him through his Christian period couldn't even defend this one. If Dylan could erase one album from the 80s, this might be it. 3. Under the Red Sky, 1990. Now here's a weird one. Under the Red Sky wasn't a disaster musically. It had top-tier production, guest appearances from George Harrison, Elton John, and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and even a few catchy tunes. But here's the catch, the lyrics. They sounded like nursery rhymes. Songs like Wiggle Wiggle and 10,000 Men had critics and fans asking, what the hell is Dylan doing? Especially after his critically acclaimed comeback, Oh Mercy, just 1 year earlier. In his memoir Chronicles, Volume 1, Dylan barely even mentions this record, and that's telling. It's like he was embarrassed by how rushed and juvenile it felt. Word on the street is he let producer Don Was take too much control, and the result was something Dylan couldn't stand behind. This was supposed to be a new chapter. Instead, it became a punchline, one that Dylan still avoids in interviews and set lists. 4. Dylan, 1973. Here's where it gets personal. Dylan, the album, not the man, was released without Bob's consent. That's right. Columbia Records dropped it after Dylan left the label for David Geffen's Asylum Records. So what did they do? They grabbed a bunch of outtakes from the Self-Portrait and New Morning sessions and released it as a new album titled Dylan. Imagine that, your old label slapping your name on a collection of songs you never approved just to make money off your fame. Dylan was furious. He has never acknowledged it in interviews. Never performed a single song from it live. And fans, even hardcore ones, mostly pretend it doesn't exist. But the damage was done. For years, casual fans thought this was a real Dylan release. It wasn't. And the fact that it carries his name, in bold, makes it one of the deepest regrets of his discography. 5. Empire Burlesque 1985. Oh, this one hurts because it almost worked. On paper, Empire Burlesque showed been a solid return to form. Dylan was trying to adapt to the mid-80s sound, bringing in synths, layered vocals, and slick production. But that was the problem. The production swallowed him. He worked with producer Arthur Baker, who was known for remixing Bruce Springsteen and New Order. But Dylan's gravelly voice and poetic lyrics didn't mesh well with the shiny plastic sound of 80s pop. The result? A confusing mix of deep lyrics trapped under cheesy drum machines. Years later, Dylan admitted he hated the final mix. He said he never got the sound he was going for and blamed the producers for taking his raw recordings and turning them into something unrecognizable. One telling sign? Dylan rarely, if ever, plays songs from this album live. The few times he does, he completely reworks them, stripping them back to bare bones. That's not nostalgia. That's repair work. Empire Burlesque isn't a terrible album. It just feels like Dylan chasing a sound that wasn't his. And when you're Bob Dylan, chasing trends instead of setting them, that's a recipe for regret. 6. Saved, 1980. Dylan's gospel trilogy, Slow Train, Coming, Saved, and Shot of Love, marked a bold and controversial turn in his career. While Slow Train had strong songwriting and a sense of purpose, Saved felt more like a sermon than a record. The fire and brimstone lyrics were relentless. There was little nuance, almost no storytelling. Just straight-up preaching. Dylan was in the middle of his born-again Christian phase, and he poured all of it into Saved. But later, even he seemed to realize he had gone too far. While he never officially disowned the album, he stopped defending it pretty quickly. In his memoir, Dylan hardly mentions Saved, focusing instead on Slow Train Coming, the one people actually connected with. And by the mid-80s, he dropped most of the songs from his set lists. That silence? It speaks volumes. What makes Saved a regret isn't just that it alienated fans. It boxed him in. People thought Dylan had become a preacher, not a poet. And for a man who thrived on reinvention, that kind of pigeonholing was a creative death sentence. Even musically, Saved doesn't hold up. The arrangements are stiff, the performances oddly flat. It sounds less like a Dylan record and more like a church service someone accidentally pressed record on AD. 7. Knocked Out Loaded, 1986. Now, let's talk about the one that even the most die-hard Dylan defenders struggle to explain. Knocked Out Loaded. This album is the black hole of Dylan's discography, and he knows it. It's barely 35 minutes long, packed with filler tracks, and contains exactly one song that anyone remembers, Brownsville Girl. That track, co-written with Sam Shepard, is a masterpiece. But the rest of the album? A total throwaway. Covers, recycled ideas, half-finished songs. Dylan sounds like he couldn't wait to get out of the studio. The craziest part, Dylan himself never promoted this album. No interviews, no tour, no liner notes, nothing. In fact, he's never played a single track from Knocked Out Loaded live, not even Brownsville Girl, despite its cult status. If there's one album that screams contract obligation, it's this one. It feels like Dylan phoned it in, and later wished he hadn't bothered at all. Critics called it sloppy, lazy, and embarrassing. One reviewer even wrote, "It's like Dylan is daring us to stop listening." Years later, when fans and critics bring up his lesser works, Knocked Out Loaded always ends up at the bottom of the barrel. And for a guy who takes pride in being misunderstood, this album was just misunderstood because there was nothing there. Here's the pattern. Dylan's regrets don't come from one place. Sometimes it's the production, sometimes it's the pressure, and sometimes it's just bad timing. But in all these albums, you can feel the same thing, a disconnect between the man and the music. He's admitted more than once that he doesn't always understand what makes a record good or bad, even his own. He told one interviewer, "Sometimes I just go through the motions. Sometimes the motions go through me. That's what makes these 7 albums so fascinating. They're not just missteps. They're windows into Dylan's inner conflict. The pressure to be a prophet, the urge to run away from his own image, the constant need to evolve, even if it means crashing a few times along the way. And in the middle of all that, a genius struggling to figure out who he is, one bad album at a time." So we've gone through the 7 albums Bob Dylan regrets, from Rush disasters to label betrayals and tone-deaf misfires. But now comes the most important question. Why do these regrets matter? After all, Dylan's career is one of the most celebrated in music history. His mistakes didn't ruin him, they defined him. And in a strange way, those regrets might be part of what makes Dylan great in the first place. Let's take a step back. Most artists curate their legacy. They clean it up. They hide the mess. But Dylan, he leaves it all out in the open. The missteps, the flops, the weird turns, they're all there. And that's intentional. Dylan once said, "Chaos is a friend of mine." For him, making a perfect album every time was never the goal. He wanted honesty, even if that honesty sounded like garbage. Take Self-Portrait, for example. It's the album he admitted was made to throw people off his trail. He didn't want to be a messiah or a generational spokesperson. He just wanted to be a musician. And if releasing a double album full of covers in a weird voice made people stop worshiping him, mission accomplished. Or look at Empire Burlesque, his most overt attempt at sounding modern. He later said he regretted how the production ruined the songs. But the truth is, Dylan was trying. Even if the end result was ugly, the effort shows a man unwilling to sit still. Most legends stick to their formula. Dylan breaks his own purpose. That's why these regrets don't make Dylan look weak. They make him human. A genius, yes, but one who stumbles, overreaches, and sometimes totally misses the mark. And in doing so, he builds something bigger than just a perfect discography. He builds a legacy of truth. And that brings us to another point. Dylan's biggest regrets are often the moments when he wasn't being true to himself. Down in the Groove? A stitched-together mess with no heart. Knocked Out Loaded? A contractual obligation with almost no effort. Even Saved, while sincere, boxed him into a persona he couldn't escape. These albums didn't fail because they were experimental. They failed because they weren't Dylan enough. That's the paradox. Dylan is never more successful than when he's completely himself, raw, flawed, unpredictable. And he's never more uncomfortable than when he's trying to please someone else, whether it's a record label, a trend, or a version of himself from 10 years earlier. Even the album Columbia, released without his permission, Dylan, 1973, became a symbol of that. It wasn't just a legal betrayal. It was a spiritual one. Songs he never wanted to share, dressed up and thrown into the marketplace. That record isn't just a regret, it's a violation. A reminder that even legends don't always control their own stories. But here's the twist. Those regrets didn't stop Dylan. If anything, they freed him. After Under the Red Sky, he disappeared for a while and came back stronger. After Empire Burlesque, he went back to rootsy, stripped-down music. After the gospel years, he found a way to merge faith and poetry without preaching. And after the forgotten 80s albums, he reinvented himself with Time Out of Mind, a masterpiece that came from the ashes of every mistake he ever made. Dylan's regrets are not roadblocks. They're mile markers. Each one tells us where he was and how far he was willing to go to find something real. There's also something to be said about how few regrets he actually talks about. For a man who's recorded over 40 studio albums, 7 regrets is a remarkably low number. But those 7? They each represent a moment of confusion, compromise, or chaos. They show us that even Bob Dylan, the Nobel laureate, the icon, the voice of the 20th century, has looked back and said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But here's the secret. He had to. Because without those failures, there's no blood on the tracks. No desire. No time out of mind. No rough and rowdy ways. Dylan's regrets are part of the same creative fire that made him great. He swings big. Sometimes he strikes out. But when he hits harder than anyone else in the history of music. So next time someone says Dylan's got a few bad albums, tell them yeah. And he probably regrets them too. But they were necessary steps in a journey that no one else could take in. And that's why he's still here. Still touring. Still creating. Still being Bob Dylan. What do you think? Did we miss an album you think Dylan regrets? Or maybe one you think he should regret? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into rock legends, their best moves, and their biggest regrets, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We've got more stories coming that you won't want to miss.